Hi everyone, and welcome to the next video in Henry and his Ministers, video number 13. Now ladies and gentlemen, this series of videos is all about topic 2 in the GCSE syllabus. Topic 2 is all about one man, Thomas Cromwell. This video will look at the rise of Thomas Cromwell. Who was he? What did he do? So, there's the man, Cromwell. I'll return to this board in a minute. Born, we think about 1485, lived to about the year 1540. Cromwell came from quite low beginnings, a low birth. He wasn't born into power. He wasn't rich. In that respect, he was just like Thomas Wolsey. Cromwell's father, again, fairly low down the social order, was a blacksmith, cloth worker, he ran a pub, often got into trouble. He was a violent man, in trouble breaking the law, for example, watering down the beer. Yet, from these low beginnings, Cromwell came to power and rose to be Henry's chief minister. He became a very famous man. He's famous now, in fact. One of the reasons why is there have been 3 books about him by a fantastic author called Hilary Mantel. This is the first of the trilogy, Wolf Hall. If ever you're bored, ladies and gentlemen, and you've finished all your GCSE studies, I recommend the 3 books by Hilary Mantel. Put aside a good bit of time. Look how thick it is. Anyway, Thomas Cromwell. What sort of a man was he? Well, let's have a look in this video. Now, as I've just said, Cromwell, like Wolsey, did not come from a rich background. In fact, his background was quite obscure. Now here we see, almost like a little mnemonic to help us remember what Cromwell was like. As we'll see in this video, ladies and gentlemen, charming, ruthless, obscure, merchant, witty, efficient, loyal lawyer. That is Cromwell. If you can remember some of those, you've got an idea of what the man was like. I'll return to this as the video goes on. But remember his early beginnings. He came from an obscure, not very rich, not very famous background. So, born 1485, we think, raised in Putney, down by London. He did not get on with his father. His father was a violent man. Cromwell left England aged about 18, 1503. He left as a young man. This was very unusual in those days. People did not tend to travel. It was a brave thing to do. For the next 10 years or so, 1503 to about 1514, Cromwell is in Europe. First of all, fighting as a mercenary over in Italy, fighting for the French army against the Spanish, fought in some quite big battles. Then he left the army and he moved to Florence, a very famous city in Italy. And there he worked for a merchant banker. Remember, Cromwell did become a merchant. After some time in Florence, he moved across to Antwerp, modern-day Belgium. There again, he worked for a cloth merchant. So he begins his career, first of all as a soldier, and then as a merchant. 1514, Cromwell decides he's had enough of Europe, and he returns to England. By then, he's fluent in French and Italian. He's learned the languages. He's also built lots of excellent trading contacts. He has got contacts all across Europe, particularly in Antwerp, which was a trading centre. On his return, over the next 5 years, one, he sets up as a merchant, as I've already suggested, using those contacts, but he also sets up as a lawyer, using his knowledge, his contacts, his understanding of the law in Europe, Cromwell begins to mould and form a very good reputation as a good businessman. Remember, 1503 he left England as a young, poor man. He returned a different person. He was older, wiser, and richer. So that part of his life as a young man begins to set him up for a new career back in England. The next stage of his life, roughly 1519 to 1529. Cromwell was ambitious. Some would say ruthless. He wanted to get to the top. He started working for our old friend Thomas Wolsey. Remember, Wolsey himself was very popular. We remember he was called Alter Rex, almost like a second king. And Cromwell begins to work for Wolsey. This gave Cromwell opportunities to begin his rise. It gave opportunities for him to advance. Cromwell soon became Wolsey's legal advisor. Remember, he's a lawyer. Gradually, as time went on, Cromwell begins to speak directly to King Henry VIII. He is beginning his rise to power and influence. Now, he's got several good qualities. He's clever, he's hard-working, he is efficient, he's a good speaker, he's persuasive, he has a mixture of wit and charm and ruthlessness. So he has got a lot of qualities: charming, ruthless, a merchant, witty, efficient. He goes on to show his loyalty, as I'll explain in a minute, and he's a good lawyer. This is Cromwell, a charming, ruthless, obscure merchant, a witty, efficient, loyal lawyer. Cromwell, there he is. That might help you to remember some of the key points about Thomas Cromwell. So, in this period of his life, he's beginning his rise to power. 1523, Cromwell became an MP, a Member of Parliament. As I've said, starting to speak to Henry VIII. Wolsey trusted Cromwell and often sent Cromwell directly to deliver news, to deliver messages straight to Henry VIII himself. So Henry VIII is becoming aware of Cromwell. Cromwell, remember, a lawyer, is beginning to take on many important legal cases in an important court in England at the time called Star Chamber. Cromwell is raising his profile. And then we get to 1529, the key year. Can you remember what happened? If not, check the previous videos. The downfall of Thomas Wolsey. Now, Wolsey was a friend, the boss, and the mentor of Cromwell. This was a tricky time for Cromwell. If Wolsey fell and lost power, which he did, and Wolsey eventually died on his way back down to London, where he'd probably have been executed, if you remember, it's a tricky time for Cromwell. What would happen to Cromwell if Wolsey had been almost like his protector? Despite it being a tricky time, Cromwell showed his loyalty. He was loyal to Wolsey when many were not. Many saw that Wolsey was losing his influence and moved away from him. Not Cromwell. Cromwell stuck by his boss, and he spoke out to try and defend him. Now, this was honourable, but it was risky. And yet, it impressed King Henry VIII. You've got to remember, many of the people who surrounded King Henry VIII were often yes men and just said what they thought King Henry wanted to hear. Cromwell did not do that. He stood out because he said, look, I know you've gone against Wolsey, but I'm telling you I'm still supporting Wolsey. This impressed King Henry VIII. After Wolsey's death, Cromwell stepped forward and looked after all of the messy legal affairs resulting in his death. Wolsey had been very, very rich. He'd employed very many people and his staff. He had a huge number of properties. Cromwell looked after all of that. All of the affairs after Wolsey's death were sorted out by Cromwell. This again impressed King Henry VIII. So King Henry appoints Cromwell to the Privy Council, the Royal Council, an inner sanctum of important ministers. This was a very important step, a promotion, if you like, for Thomas Cromwell. He's still not yet the top dog. He's still not yet Chief Minister, but he's been promoted. Now then, one major obstacle still remained for King Henry VIII. One huge problem still concerned Henry. And it was all about his marriage to Catherine of Aragon. We've seen in some of the previous videos, Wolsey had desperately tried to solve the problem, and he had failed. Well, who could finally solve this seemingly impossible puzzle, this seemingly impossible problem? Who was going to solve it for King Henry VIII? Step forward. Thomas Cromwell. Cromwell steps right to the centre. And what did Thomas Cromwell do to solve the problem of Henry's marriage to Catherine of Aragon? Well, I'll have to tell you that in the next video, because what he did next propelled Cromwell right up to the top of the board. Cromwell did become Chief Minister. How? Why? Next video. As ever, I hope this has been useful, showing you the background, what Thomas Cromwell was like. Now we'll see what he actually did for King Henry VIII. All the best now. I'll see you soon. Bye for now.